Exactly.
Hey, welcome back underground.
What's up, guys? I'm really excited, Brian. You know why?
Because Tyler's here. I think we did this last week.
We got to get a better intro.
I will say, I just want to start with a little bit of an apology. I felt like I left you hanging last week.
I really appreciate that. It's
I,
about time.
I actually did send you a text apologizing. This is me in front of everyone apologizing.
Wow.
I was just emotionally in a hard place.
Oh yeah.
And Corey, he carried the weight. He carried the weight. I just want to thank everyone. I mean, Corey, in front of everyone.
Hey, you're welcome. And Tyler, I just want you to be able to hear this too.
In a way, it's really more celebrating my ability to publicly repent.
I feel like I stepped into a family meeting and I don't know what to do. I don't know. Should I speak up or just sit in a corner here? I don't know.
If you're uncomfortable, we have accomplished the task.
Oh, yes. So yeah, we've been cruising through 248's study on, the 15 common observations and urban movements, which a lot of them just look like observations in all disciple making movements.
That's true.
And my friend Tyler here. Tyler, I want to hear your story, but I remember hearing years ago from this friend of mine named Roy Moran. And we'll have Roy actually on in a few weeks again for another episode. And
I don't think it's in a few weeks. We're recording him tomorrow.
We are going to have Roy on
be
soon.
An episode after this,
maybe very soon.
You
Roy
set this
Moran.
up.
Yeah, who knows? I don't know. And Roy, I remember Roy telling me about this crazy crew in Lubbock that is doing some like radical crazy stuff, and he doesn't know if he's like, are they crazy? But he's been corrupting them, and Roy helped corrupt me, thinking about multiplicable disciple making and churches emerging all through our city, blah 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 blah.
Are you redefining the word corruption?
It's like a nice corruption.
Yeah, okay, I'm just making sure.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like Roy moved you more toward Jesus, and that's corrupting. I just was making that
away from maybe some ways that I was doing things that weren't healthy.
Gotcha.
Anywho, so that's actually the first time I knew of you and your crew. So Tyler, I want to hear a little bit of who you are, how you got here, and a little bit of that journey that you guys took of like getting into kind of multiplying disciples in churches.
Can I say something before Tyler starts talking?
No, sorry.
Okay, well, I'm going to do it anyway. For those that have listened to the podcast for a really long time, because I think this is episode 199 or something.
Ooh. Tyler's so close to being 200.
Yeah.
Sorry, dude.
So we interviewed
Dang.
we interviewed one of Tyler's teammates, friends, spiritual fathers, I don't know, whatever you call him, Chris Galanis.
He laughed at spiritual fathers.
It's like, nah, not so much.
That's funny.
Anyway, you could go way back and hear that whole story from another angle too, which is also important. Like every movement has like people are like, hey, tell us the story of the underground. I'm like, which one? Like my angle on it, So today we get to hear a whole nother angle on that. So I'll stop talking. I'll stop interrupting. Maybe.
Totally. Well, first of all, I'm going to blame Roy Moran. He's the reason for all this. So it's all his fault. If you don't like anything I say or anything we've done, it's all Roy's fault. So I say that almost in every podcast, that it is Roy's fault.
Hey, I think we can all agree on that. We're cool with that. Yeah. Okay, good. I'll send this episode directly to Roy.
Yeah. So my name's Tyler Dipprey. I'm in the budding metropolis of Lubbock, Texas.
Go Red Raiders.
Go Red Raiders. That's exactly right. Wreck 'em. Everybody always asks, so that means you're in Texas. You're close to Dallas. And I'm like, well, if close is 5 hours away. And they're like, oh, so you're close to Houston. Oh, yeah, that's pretty close. It's like 10. San Antonio's 8. So we are smack dab in the center of God's country. Okay. This is where God went to show off. No, come on. That's a whole nother end of the spectrum.
I'm sorry.
That's a whole nother end.
I'm so sorry.
But yeah, so West Texas, we're here in the South Plains of Texas. So our story is, I grew up kind of ministry wise within mega churches. I've been in mega churches in Los Angeles, in Lubbock, and a couple other places. And so about 10 years ago, I moved back to Lubbock. I'm from a small town around Lubbock originally. Never thought I'd come back, but made our way back, like all people do to Lubbock. It seems like it just pulls you back. So you come back. I came back about 10 years ago, and my intention was running the race of megachurch. like just doing it. I thought this was the best way, best strategy for reaching people for Jesus. Okay. It really had nothing to do other than that. I really thought it was the best strategy to see the most people reached. And so we did that. I would say by most measurements, we were successful. We were a top 100 fastest growing church in the nation several times. We had like 10 campuses, 8,000 people, weekends, fog machines, all the crazy stuff, right? So if you did it, if you've thought of it, we did it. Like we turned our whole lobby into a Lego land one time. Yeah. Why? I can't answer those questions, but we did. And so we're kind of just
became more like Jesus that day. I guarantee it.
I'm sure of it. I'm sure. We also had Batman in the lobby multiple times, like theatrical Batman costume.
The Dark Knight.
Yeah. Anyways, so that's kind of like where my background is. Well, about 7 years ago, we hit a milestone in our church that was just kind of a God goal. We said we wanted 10,000 commitments to Christ in 10 years. Well, at year 8, we hit that mark. And we were just praising God and going, man, that's amazing. I can't believe this happened. But the problem when you hit a goal like that is you have to ask the question like, well, what do we do now? Right? Like, we didn't expect to hit that in the first, because you have to remember this started in a guy's living room. It was with 6 people when they made that goal. So it was crazy. So what we do is we begin exploring like what's next. Well, as we're exploring, we start meeting some people. We had ministry partners in places like India with a guy named Victor John, in places like China, Brother Yoon, and just trying to understand what God was doing all throughout the world. And so as we're talking about thousands of people coming to know Jesus in 10 years, they keep putting out numbers like millions in like 4 years. And we're like, what is happening? Like that, it doesn't even seem like we're talking about the same things. So of course we do the American thing of like, they must not understand what we're talking about, right? So we deep dive, try to understand, leads us to several partners, David Watson, Roy Moran. And so we just get down this rabbit hole of going, we eventually get to a point where we say, these are either guys that are lying to our face, in which case we should probably stop being partners with them, right? Or they are telling the absolute truth and it makes no sense to us, right? Yeah. We chose the second one. We didn't think they were liars. There was enough compelling evidence. And so we just start running down this track. Well, fast forward a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of failures, a lot of mistakes. Over the course of 2 years, our church began to transition. And today, in 2019, we had our last gathering. We no longer have any type of mega church, and we're a decentralized network of house churches. So that was in 2019, right before COVID, right? So COVID hits, and nothing changed for us because we had already made this huge change.
Right.
The cool thing now is we have more disciples in our network today than we had coming to eLife in our heyday. So we have over 8,000 disciples. Those are not discovery groups. Those are not people exploring Jesus. Those are disciple makers who are actively seeking to pursue the kingdom wherever they're at. So that's just been so exciting for us. That's a snapshot of our story. Of course, you can read our book, Mega Church Multiplication, for like a much longer version of that.
Yeah. Still one of my favorite books to give to people who are just like, exploring some of the crazy stuff that we're talking about. And a lot of it is just kind of a lot of the early training that I went through. And DMMs, basically, you guys are just
totally
going through that and through some of Stan Parks and other trainings. So it's just beautiful stuff, man. I love your story. Inspiring. Y'all crazy. Y'all, that's what you say, right? Did you say that in West Texas too? Are you y'all people?
Of course we say y'all. What would you say? You guys?
Yeah.
Just listen to yourself. That sounds so weird.
Y'all. I don't need
just
this
rolls off your tongue.
It's also sexist. Sorry.
No, it's a conversation we have a lot of what.
Do you have questions? Because I have things.
No,
No.
I don't have questions.
Okay.
He's peering. He's just like deeply looking at me like, no, dude.
Well, we're doing this episode on inside leaders. So like I want to get there sort of eventually, maybe.
But if we don't, it's cool.
Okay.
Whatever.
Good.
Yeah, just go with it, man.
Well, I just want to throw this out there because I want to hear about the metric. Like we're talking about urban disciple making movements. You started with our goal is to see 10,000 commitments to Christ, which is probably that's my heritage. That would be the world I grew up in. Like commitment to Christ, check, we got it done. Like we're celebrating that. There's a lot of joy in it. I'm actually, I think people hear that from me sometimes and they think I'm diminishing that. I'm not. I'm just recognizing its incompleteness. It is absolutely a critical component of following Jesus. That there is that whether it's over the course of time, I hope it's a moment where, I hear people say like, I don't have like a moment. It's like, I don't really care that there's a moment, but like there is a moment right now where you can go, no, I definitely follow Jesus. That moment, it counts.
Yeah.
And all the rest
And
of
then
the
you
ones.
really unpack it in you have like 400 moments.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
they're actual moments. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So commitment to Christ is important, but you are reframing this in light of now there's 8,000 disciple makers. So that's really where I wanted to go first, because it doesn't sound like you're equating conversion and disciple making. That's a phrase we use often. We're not equating conversion with disciple making. Conversion is a part of our disciple making, and we're constantly being converted from unbelief to belief in Jesus in every area of life. So I'm curious what your definitions are that might help normal people go, oh, that's what you mean when you say disciples and disciple maker. Like there's some language around that like you're able to go, there's 8,000 of these, and you don't just mean people that pray to prayer. Like what has been helpful in reframing that?
Well, as you'll see, I have almost no original thoughts. I'm just going to rip from all my mentors. So Stan Parks sits us in a room as we're trying to figure out this whole thing. And he goes, hey, so you'll have 10,000 commitments in 10 years. Praise God. Right? Like, I mean, we really did. We were celebrating it. And he goes, that's amazing. Now, I'm going to ask some tough questions. And he goes, how many of those commitments to Christ are disciples? And we're in a room with like 20 pastors. Okay. So we all realize that, hey, there's no way all of them are being, and so we asked the question, well, by what metric are you saying, like, what's a disciple? And he basically said that you can make up the metric that you want. So we decided if they read the Bible, like once a week, if they come to a gathering and, and if they're just pursuing it all, that counts. Okay. That counts. So we went from 10,000 down to, it was still a few thousand, like maybe 4,000, right? Because the vast majority, and this is in any church, mega church or not, most of the people that commit their lives to Christ, you don't see them again necessarily. Like they may pop into your church, but you don't get to life on life disciple them. So then we go, okay, well, that's still a pretty good number. And he goes, awesome. Okay. So of those 4,000, how many of them have made a disciple? And that was the oh crap moment. Because we just went, oh no, if that's the standard of them taking what they know and then passing it on to someone else, you were talking handfuls, right? Like I was a leadership and groups pastor at that point. And so I was probably one of the ones that had like the most, right? Just because of my role. And I'm counting them on both hands, like 7 or 8, right? And I think it was at that moment that we just went, oh no, I think there's a problem with our model. Because if it was so stark that we just started going. So I would say my definition now is the disciple makers, you heard me say makers, they are people that are not only committed to following Jesus, but helping others do the same thing with their family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, and others. And so that for me is the difference between a conversion and a disciple maker. I also think that Scott McKnight has a great book called Jesus in the Kingdom of God, I think, something like that. And it just talks about the difference between a salvation gospel and a kingdom gospel. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with salvation. But to your point, it's not full. Salvation is a part of it, but it's not the fullness of the gospel. So that's kind of my answer.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. I think you ask people, why did Jesus come? And I've heard people go, well, to seek and to save that which was lost. And they just pop that phrase out there. And it's like, man, we read back into that phrase about 100-year-old theology of pray this prayer, revival, whatever framework that's, kind of get in or whatever. And it's like when Jesus said to seek and to save that which was lost, it was like, this is a kingdom ethic in light of thousands of years of Hebrew people, of God restoring all things on earth as it is in heaven.
Right.
It's much bigger,
Right.
So thanks for
Right.
taking a little time to say that. I just think it's something we do, I think, I hope fairly regularly. Like people are like, we're asking somebody else what their definition of a disciple is. And it's like, well, maybe we should just do that every week. If we don't have a good definition, probably not going to hit it or make
Exactly.
one,
Yeah, absolutely. Like I sat down with a couple this past week who I've trained in DMM stuff years ago, and they circled back and they're now at a new stage of life in an apartment complex here in Kansas City, have a ton of favor. And this is going to be my segue into some of the inside leadership stuff.
Segue.
As well.
I wish we had a little musical button for that.
We'll go now. I push the button.
Segue.
It's a really good thing.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting down with, and one of my favorite things to do when hanging with people is like, you can see the light bulb click in them that you don't have to be an expert. You just have to be faithfully present. And it was so funny because this one person I'm sitting with, she's like, she had all these preconceived ideas of what it meant to live on mission or make disciples or even do discovery Bible study. And just talking through a little bit, she was like able to voice, like, I can do this. Like, I can do this. And I was like, I don't know what you were thinking before, but let's just, whatever that was, we'll put it in a ball, we'll throw it away. And whatever this is that you now have in your brain that's empowering you, go with that.
Yeah.
Right. And so they are natural insiders. They're already disciples and pursuing disciple making, but they're natural insiders into an apartment complex. Right. So that's one idea of what it looks like, in a sense, to be inside leaders. Then a lot of times I'm gonna have two scenarios here. And Tyler, I know that you can probably speak to both of these, is that then there's other times where a lot of what we learn from disciple making movement catalysts and leaders globally is that we have kind of these outside believers, these missionaries, and we find inside leaders. They're probably not yet followers of Jesus, right? Through the persons of peace, and we empower them to collect their people, and we help them make disciples of their own people, and then they can reproduce that. You, I know, have spent a lot of time in jail settings and in prison settings, right? And we've talked back and forth on that. So I know that concept of inside leadership is key when you're making disciples in a setting like that. But I just love to hear your general perspective, maybe a story or two, things like as you think about inside leadership in Lubbock, Texas, in your various settings, what are some things that stew in your brain?
Yeah, for me, inside leadership is the key to everything. In fact, I would say you probably should spend more time looking for that and praying than doing anything else, because it's just so key. So I'll give you two stories, because I've seen, whenever I think of this, I think of two guys in particular, one in the jail, one outside, because sometimes people will come up to me and be like, well, that's in the jail, as if they're not real people and it's almost like doesn't count. But just for that, I'll give you an example of where it works as well. So the first one I'll give you is, I was brand new to DMM. I mean, we're talking 8 months. Okay. 8 months into this, and we're still have a mega church that we're running on the weekends, but we're trying to pursue this. So we go to this, we figure out from the police, what are the 3 highest crime rate neighborhoods in Lubbock? Okay. We figure out those neighborhoods, we choose one, and then we figure out through sources in our church, there's a particular apartment complex where a lot of the drugs come from. So we start going, all right, well, let's go there. We didn't know any better. We had no idea. And so 4 white pastors load up, and we just decide we're going to show up to this apartment complex, and we're just going to start prayer walking. We did this for about 3 months. The most consistent feedback we got were people rolling down their windows and going, pigs, pigs. You know, we're just cops, right? Like they thought that's the only white person that came into that area and looked like us. It didn't work. Like nothing was working. Well, we decide we were tired of walking. And truthfully, we probably should have walked for about another year and it probably would have been better. But we start this little Bible study. The first time, I'm going to call him Ricky. It's not his real name, but first time Ricky comes to our little Bible study on the sidewalk, he is fall down drunk. Fall down drunk. Okay. Him and his wife come. The next time I see him, he's going up the stairs and I have to help him up the stairs to his apartment. Okay. And we're talking, this is like 8 a.m., 10 a.m. So it's early morning. Over the course of time, we just keep meeting with Ricky and his wife. They're far from Jesus. Probably about 6 months in, he gives his life to Jesus. Says, hey, I want to follow Jesus. And you want to talk about radical just turning. We start doing discovery Bible studies with him. He's bringing his neighbors. He starts a coat drive where he basically tells us, hey, there's a lot of people in this apartment complex that need coats, but I don't have money to get them coats. We bought the coats, our church did, but we gave them to Ricky, and Ricky starts passing them out to the community. I mean, it starts like a wildfire going. This guy was nuts because as crazy as his lifestyle was before he came to Jesus, it was the same guy. So like he wanted everybody to know about Jesus, even if it's 4 a.m. and he sees a guy out sleeping in the parking lot in a car, he'd go knock on their car. And I'm like, dude, you're going to get shot. Like, don't do that. This is not the place that you do it. But he just did. And you just see this radical transforming that's happening not only in his life, but in this community. So that's the first time that I saw an insider of going, he could do things and interact with people that we couldn't interact with. We were totally trying to interact with them, but they didn't trust us. They didn't believe us. It was only through him and through others that we were even allowed to be in the parking lot. But that's as far as we got. As far as we got was parking lot. Forget getting in homes. He went into multiple homes, started multiple groups. So that's the first story that I have. And it just opened my eyes to there's something to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then I go into the jail. And this is several years into my disciple making journey. I'm a little more experienced. I still don't really know what I'm doing, right? I still don't think I know what I'm doing, but I'm going into the jail and it's a regular pod. So in the Lubbock County Jail, it's about 150 guys are inside of a pod. So basically a pod is like an open air dormitory, but within that they have tanks. So there's 8 tanks within this, the pod. And in each tank, there's like 8 or 9 guys, right? You do the math. I can't figure out that math on the fly.
We don't do math.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just
other numbers. Yep. We got you.
Believe me, 8 or 9. Yeah. So I go in there and for weeks, there's only one guy coming to my class. So all I do whenever I go into this class is I share the Roman road. And then I was doing a discovery Bible study with them. So there's one guy that's doing it. He's just consistent. So we had this for about 2 months. It's just me and him. And he's a believer already. So he's, I know this is shocking, but guys in jail can't actually know Jesus. They just make like really terrible decisions. So he actually knew Jesus before I got there. But I just remember sitting down and going, bro, what do you think we should do? Like, this doesn't seem helpful to really anybody. How is this helpful? So we prayed for about 3 weeks together. Into the 3rd week, he brings to me an idea of doing a more formalized class. I thought it was stupid. I didn't think it was a good idea. I didn't understand why it made any difference for someone to get a piece of paper that said certificate of completion. But this guy thought it mattered.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, all right, let's do it. So I craft this program. We start rolling. Fast forward 8 months. That one guy turned into 8 churches in that pod. Hear me when I say churches. I don't mean groups. I don't mean they were discovering Jesus. I mean they were baptized, following Jesus. They were baptized in the jail, following Jesus, and seeking to make more groups and churches. From that, we had like an explosion in the jail. We had 13 churches going at one point, and this is within a year period. In the county jail. Some of those churches even jumped outside and they started churches with family members and things like that. So talk about insider. I had nothing to do with this. I didn't plant the single church that maybe I planted was with Derek in that room, right? Like maybe you can give me some credit for that. Everything else, it was Derek and him pouring into guys. Yeah. And the thing is, he had 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. I had an hour and a half once a week.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's just no way that I would be more effective than him. On top of that, these guys, there's no hiding in the jail. So whenever he talks about following Jesus, if he's serious about it, they see it. And there's real credibility there that you just can't buy. So those are my two stories that I have.
So good.
All right. So I'm going to ask both of you, because both of you have that experience. We talk about Share the Hope and Corey's experience in the jail system a lot. I want to validate all of those people that say, well, that happened in jail. Because that's true.
It's a unique setting.
Yeah,
it is.
And my neighborhood, while I spend a lot of time there and have a bunch of experience of people there, it's just different. And what happens in 1,000 different places across Kansas City, they're all different contexts. So like, I want to push both of you to just sort of own that reality and go, all right, for the rest of people that are not thinking, I'm going to go to the jail, I have to have a jail ministry. Like this, it's not resonating with them. Or maybe the people like for the Kansas City Underground, our network, where we're probably like 60% of our disciple makers / micro churches would think network first. So I think they're hearing this and they're like, oh yeah, I do this, and here are the names of the people that I could think about, and that's resonating with me, and that's an inspirational story. I'm picking up some things like, oh, you spent 3 weeks in prayer. Need to remember to go back to that first. Like that's where the inspiration really comes from, is you slow down and pray first. For a whole bunch of other ordinary people that are not going, like when they hear inside leader, they're not thinking a network that's like so specific like that. They're thinking, I go to work, or maybe I really feel a conviction that like the cross street in my neighborhood of these 15 houses is like, that's where I'm supposed to be. Like, how does this translate into the other context? What are some things that maybe come to mind where you're like, yeah, like think this way, or I'd encourage you in this way, or like, I'm not trying to sit here and say like that only works in your context. I'm just trying to say like it is unique. Like you can't deny that.
There's some things that are more obvious.
Right.
Like you are more obviously an outsider, and you have to more obviously find an insider. There's a container of relationships that's very strong, and quite literally a container in jail, right? That makes some of those concepts more in your face. But yes, I'd love to hear Tyler's.
And both of you are very unique leaders as well. And both of you are, we joke about like you're paid professionals in a way. Like this is I'm a part of the system that has the freedom. Now everybody could start volunteering in jails and do that. But we lean so much into like, you have a masterpiece mission, and it might not be the jail system.
Right.
And again, there's a bunch of people that are like, no, man, it's adoption, foster care, or it's, women that have struggled with whatever, abuse and addiction. I'm going after like that. My heart breaks for that. I just think there's so many ordinary people that listen to this that, like they're hearing it and they're inspired, but like, how do I translate this into my life? Because I want to pick something up from this.
Yeah. I mean, you hit on a lot of things.
I know, it's hard.
I'm an adopted parent, have a little boy, that we just adopted. I guess my thing would be this: in certain contexts, and I think this is inside the jail, I think it's also true outside, especially in communities that you don't look, you're an obvious outsider. I can just tell you, there's lots of neighborhoods that I've worked in that it's very apparent I don't belong there. Like, and like, they're not being mean. They're not being, I don't live there. That's not the way that I carry myself. in those contexts, you have to have an insider. Now, my wife is a CPA. She works at an office building every day, right? My big refrain to her is she is the insider.
Mhm.
She's the insider because now a lot of this has to do with, can you build trust and credibility with people that when their lives interact with questions, they'll come to you.
Man.
You're someone that they come to. And so I think that's something that if you're just talking about, hey, I don't do this for a living, I'm just an office worker, I do this or do that. My question to you would be, are you someone that people trust? And can you develop that? And are you living your spiritual life in a way that it would be obvious that if someone had something fall apart or something go wrong, they would come to you and they would say, hey, my mom is sick. Would you pray for it? I can just tell you, my wife's coworkers do that.
Mhm.
And so you don't need an insider. You are that. And so that's what I think each context you need to look at and see. In my neighborhood, I don't know that I have to have an insider. Now, it would be more helpful because there's certain neighbors that are super well connected.
Absolutely.
And that's what I realized really quickly because we've started discovery groups in our neighborhood as well. And so there are certain people that are just they're connectors of the community.
Yep.
It's helpful to have them and it will go a lot faster. However, you can build that on your own if you need to. Whereas like the jail forces you to do something that you just have no choice. You have absolutely no choice.
Yep. Let me throw one more layer on here that I want to, for the ordinary people that are listening. I think that was super helpful.
So
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
And we say that often, right? Like you might be the person of peace or the inside leader. And I would say that's true for both of our neighborhoods. Like people are going to come to us if something falls apart. I
Or
think,
our wives.
yeah, that's true. I was like, your wife comes to you if something. Oh, you mean they're going to come to Sue's
Yeah.
before you? Yes.
Yeah.
For the ordinary person listening, the difference or the layer of this that you need to add on the filter is in those other contexts, it's probably going to take a lot longer and it's going to be more mundane. So you've built up that trust and credibility, but you're in a context where the proverbial doesn't hit the fan every day. And people's lives aren't just falling apart every day, and they're not just coming to you every day with a crisis where suddenly that turns into a spiritual conversation that their lives are transformed, and then boom, revival in the hood. Which it happens. I'm not saying that's not the case, but it's just more like if you're in a context where you are owning the inside leader role, that may not be a context where there's some sort of desperation or crisis or some reality where the gospel might move quicker. Just like breathe in deep. It's okay.
Yeah.
You have established that sense of credibility and trust. And there will be a day where there's fruit harvested, and then you'll be back into also a space where it's like, nope, you're just cultivating the soil, continuing to be that person to receive it. And then there just are other people that, like, there's also the reality of keep exploring. There might be another context Jesus is also calling you into where you might find an inside leader and other things may happen.
Exactly right, man. Like I was actually just texting with a buddy named Peter. Peter, if you listen, what's up?
Like right now while he was talking?
Yeah. I wasn't listening to Tyler. Anything Tyler.
Wow.
Yeah. Peter just said better things, you know? Anywho, but we were talking about, like, I wrote something a long time ago about the long game versus the short game. In the idea of person of peace and inside leaders in an American context. And then I used the examples of jail, where it was that short game. I could find that person, they had influence or could develop influence pretty quickly. And then boom, you saw fast fruit in a sense. And then there was long games where like the good newsing of that place took what you were just describing, a little bit more time, a little bit more effort, a little bit more like outward, like I'm going to live a life so that so that we can talk about real things when real hard things come up in your life. And it's a really important missional strategy in our context. I imagine same with Lubbock. probably even more Christianized culture than Kansas City, I would assume, right? So like how like that long game, short games, like sometimes the long game, you're developing that. You are becoming a community connector. You're living a life of hospitality because you're realizing people aren't connected, so you're going to be that. Or you do that alongside one of your neighbors or one of your friends that's just naturally good at that, and you bring them along as a teammate early on. Anyway, I like we talk about some of those things often. It's really good to kind of do a deep dive here with you. Like, what are you hearing, Tyler, as we ramble?
Yeah, I just think that that's so true. I do think that one of the reasons we often in people's journey, especially if they come from a context where they live in a neighborhood where you drive in, you shut your garage and, whatever. One of the things we teach them pretty early on is we're not telling you to forsake your neighborhood at all, but we're telling you that's probably not the only place you need to get started because what happens is it's really hard soil.
Yep.
It's really hard soil. And here's why. So the biggest difference I see in the jail and the outside world, in the jail, they know they have needs.
Yeah, we see
Like it's painfully obvious. They're like, oh crap, my life is falling apart. In the outside world, their life can be falling apart too. I know several neighbors that have marriages that are falling apart. But on the outside, they look fine. They can cover it up. They can they can go to work. They can do whatever. So I think the desperation for needing something in their lives is not the same on the outside. And if you want me to be honest, I think that's what takes a long time to develop the trust where you can actually speak in to someone's life and help them either see their need or by a reflection of your life, see what they actually are missing in your life. And that's why it's a long-term strategy. So oftentimes we tell people when they get started, you'll get discouraged and you'll quit if you just stay in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Not telling you to stop, but I am telling you, do find another place. And we found workplaces have been really, really helpful. People are a little more open in workplaces. And we've had lots of groups start within the workplace. So that's one of the places I often tell people, hey, if you're not looking to just go to another neighborhood, start with your work. See if you can get something going. And one of the key differences, though, is don't start a Bible study. By that, what I mean is you can call it a Bible study because that's what most people understand. You are going to read the Bible, but the goal of the Bible study is not for more people to come. It's it's to teach those people that come to do what you're doing with their family. That's what you're looking to do. You're looking to. It's almost like a training more than it is a group. So,
yeah, spiritual conversations first, and let that lead to discovery. I think that's all right, Tyler, we're going to wrap up, and we always give guests this space to speak last. So if there's, we'll say bye afterwards. So I'll say anyway. But like, if you just are listening to the Spirit right now, what might He be saying through you to the Kansas City Underground? And I'm going to ramble for a second. I had a thought a second ago, and it has escaped. Oh, I know what it was. I just just to emphasize, like in light of this, I guess my heart is really drawn to all the ordinary people that I hope are listening or watching now, is you're a disciple maker wherever you go. You don't you're not just a disciple maker if you're like, well, my neighborhood's my context. And I only have to flip that switch if I'm in my neighborhood. Or it's this other context over here that I really feel drawn to in our city. And so I'll flip the switch when I get there. If you're following Jesus, you're a disciple maker wherever you go. And so, it's just about framing up where am I and where am I in that process with people. So if my neighborhood is this place that I love and I long for, I just have to own that there are seasons where it may accelerate and seasons where it may slow down. But is my life continuing to move towards belief in Jesus in such a way that I continue to be that person in that space? And then, if I'm in a workspace, I'm still a disciple maker there, so how am I thinking about fostering spiritual conversations that lead to whatever? But in all of this, we're trying to insert the idea into the framework for ordinary people of seek inside leaders in your neighborhood, there are those people that are better connected than you are. Unless there aren't, then be that person. In your workspace, there might be people that just know how to get everybody to show up to the, what do they call it? The after hour, 5 o'clock,
happy
whatever,
hour.
happy hour. That's it, happy hour. In whatever spaces there's inside leaders, seek them and empower them. Speak life into them. Call out what you see in them. So it's just about using this one tool in light of the greater conversation, but also just owning that you're that disciple maker. So think about what Jesus is asking you to do in the moment. All right, I'm done. I gave you enough time.
And I love that you pretended like you don't know what a happy hour is. That was almost convincing. All right, Tyler, it's all yours.
Yeah, I think I would say one of the things I want to be careful about in settings like this, podcasts like this, when you share stories of successes, people often want to just pigeonhole and say that's what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
But I think there's two things that for me, this has been harder and longer than I ever imagined it would be. And the successes have been fewer and far between. They've been hard. It has been years and years of just stubbornly persevering. Like, this doesn't make any sense. I've had to restart my own house church 6 times. And I don't mean like 6 times 6 people left. I mean, it was my wife and I starting over 6 times. Like, there's an element to this that you have to die to yourself and die to your ego and continue to do it. And it's hard because it's supposed to be. If this is really, whether you want to use athletics or a war, this is enemy territory. And so if you don't think it's going to be hard, you're fooling yourself. And I think that it would have helped me early on to realize this was long obedience and it was going to be tough. Now it's going to be worth it. Hear me say that. I wouldn't trade anything. I wouldn't go back to the old model, but it's hard. And it's built on the backs, not of people like me. It's built on the back of regular disciples. Derek and some of these other guys, Ricky that I mentioned, they're not paid.
Yeah.
They're regular dudes. And they're the ones that started the groups. If you want to look at the family tree, mine's lacking compared to these regular disciple makers.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say is, and it goes along with this being hard. So I gave a lot of numbers today of like generations and 9 churches and things like that. And that's true. That's 100% part of movement, right? All those things I can back up. I can show you those. But I think we miss it if we don't also talk about the quality of the disciples that come from this. So it's not just quantity, but the quality. You're talking about guys that would give their life. And many of them come from gang backgrounds where when I say that, I'm not messing around. To follow Jesus means they're either going to have to get jumped out, killed, or it's a real thing. And so I think the quality of disciples is so much better in a model where you go slow and deep with them. You go so deep with them that I don't think that can be overvalued, especially in a model that's different than the model that I came from. The model I came from was, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not even talking about it being bad because there's good things about it. But one thing that cannot be denied is the quality here is just so much different than what we saw in the previous model. And that for me is something that needs to be celebrated and said, and why it's a clear distinction of why more people might want to consider a strategy like this moving forward.
Oh man.
It's good, dude.
So good. Tyler, you're awesome, bro. Good to hang with you.
It's good.
I'm sure I'll see you somewhere. Probably when K-State's dominating. Texas Tech.
Hey, no, yeah, you're not going to get me. I'm a Chiefs fan for right now because y'all have our boy Patrick Mahomes.
That's true. That's true.
That's Texas Tech bread, bro. Just
Mm.
look at all the Texas Tech around that stadium. You're welcome for Pat Mahomes.
Well, on
Corn
behalf of
and
Kansas
bread.
City, we just want to say thank you, Lubbock.
Thank you, Lubbock.
All right, brother.
You're welcome. You're
And Roll
welcome.
Tide.
Bless you, dude. We'll talk to you later.
All right.